don't need it. Yep. Yeah. Or that. Probably not that. Definitely don't need that. The seller told me it just needs rings. So for those who aren't faint of heart, these are just a joy to ride. Problem is, they're darn expensive, and they're getting worse. Especially the glorified, hallowed, unicorn poop ATC 250R. Regrettably, I sold mine last summer. That's okay though. Parts are getting expensive for those things. So, here's the goal. I want to make that like an 85, 86 ATC 250R. The biggest difference in the frame between this and an 250R is the head tube angle, which is about 27 degrees. 250R is 21.5 degrees for the 86. And that rear shock is too high. Notice the lack of a big nub sticking up right there for the shock mount. What that allows is a low seat height. Three-wheelers are obviously kind of tricky to get around corners, so gotta have a low seat height. The modern dirt bike conversions you see, I know TPC's making all these conversions, and they're cool. Maybe if you're blasting around in the dunes, they're great. But for sliding around a track, they are too tall. The ergonomics on them are just wrong. They're too tall. They can't get that seat height lower because they're using the dirt bike shock and four-wheeler swing arm. To reach the mythical 86 250R stick it to the groundedness that it has, we're going to do two things. Take 6 degrees out of the head tube. Cut this off and lower it. I'm going to use a Banshee rear setup because the shock is nice and short. Honestly, the shock will probably sit like right about here. But you can just use zero rake triples and do a leading axle setup and it'll all be the same. I mean, the trail is the only thing that matters. Like, you know, your trail on the ground where your fork angle meets the ground and the distance between the axle and the rake and the waffle numbers. I actually had one guy who told me that he believes that Honda made a mistake when they engineered the head tube angle and they were just chasing after it when they put 6 degrees of rake back into the triple clamps. I think it's unlikely that what is considered to be the best handling three-wheeler ever made was on accident because engineers didn't know what they were doing. So, I propose that there's another factor people aren't considering, which is wheel flop. Anyways, you want to look into that, go look it up. I'm not going to explain it here in this video. But basically my idea here is rather than recalculate all these numbers that Honda spent millions of dollars coming up with, I'm just going to copy it. Front plan is custom triples, 6 degrees of rake built into triple clamps. 2002 YZ85 forks, resprung and valved and all that good stuff. 86 250R hub. So this is a 200X disc. I'm going to turn that disc into an adapter to run the YZ250 front brake. So, because I do not have access to a milling machine, we're going to try to do this caveman style. Very basic stuff. I think that a person could probably make these with just a drill press. I'll double check this, but I believe it's 50 millimeter at the top of the bottom of the tube and 46 at the top. So I've got what's called a fly cutter here. I've never used one. You normally put this in a mill, possibly a lathe, I guess. The plan is to get the bulk of the hole done just with a hole saw. This is like 44 millimeters, somewhere in that range. So I should be able to use this to start the hole, then come in with one of my various sized fly cutters, clean it up, and get a pretty reasonable finish. This is probably a 200X axle. This is 15 millimeter, 12 millimeter, 15 millimeter OD, 10 millimeter ID. Turns out this is about exactly 15 millimeters, and this is 14.9 millimeters. So You need to take 1/10 of a millimeter off of this. Caveman style. This is very safe. Definitely do this at home. You boys out there with big manly drill presses might want to be careful about doing this. Me with my ninny little drill press, I think I'll be alright. That'll work. So this is a 12 millimeter drill bit. We're going to attempt to drill it out without going through the side of it. Oh no! Well, that's disastrous. Remember that thing I said I didn't want it to do? So after my catastrophic learning opportunity, I decided to not drill it in one shot. So I am slowly stepping up my bits. Okay, so attempt number 2 went much better. No hole in the side this time. Slides in there nice. 15 millimeter to 12 millimeter. And you can see it recesses just a little bit on each side, so the pressure goes on the spacers and on those bearings. All that my aluminum piece is doing is just taking up the gap. So there's the front axle buttoned up. 12 millimeter threaded rod through the whole assembly, nuts on both sides. When you got to pull it apart, pull the nut off, slide the axle out, hub comes off. Awesome.